If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the culture, don't get me. It should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me.
In almost 40 years, I've never seen anything like this.
We all didn't expect this, of course, but tomorrow's the day. We're gonna be happy regardless.
The Shedeur Sanders circus is officially over. He finally got drafted. Coming into the NFL draft, I would have never thought that this would happen to the guy until I did a deep dive into my archives and every piece of reporting I've ever done on Shedeur Sanders, and then it started to make a little bit more sense. To give you an idea, 1 year ago, many of us thought that Shedeur Sanders would be the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, and it truly wasn't a wild take at the time. This wasn't a draft class that had tremendous quarterback depth like last year, and Shedeur Sanders had a lot of things going for him. I mean, in our previous video, we showed you some tape in regards to how good of a player Shedeur Sanders could potentially even be in the NFL. Some fans may mention that he might not have a cannon for an arm, and he's not necessarily the fastest, but there are some plays that just made him look good. I referenced this play in my last video on this topic, where Colorado comes out in 11 personnel with all but one of its weapons being lined up on the wide side of the field to its left. TCU is only going to blitz 3 off the snap, but they have the wide side blitzer wrapping around the line in an attempt to tie up Colorado's horrible offensive line, and Shedeur Sanders was able to recognize this. This is a tremendous high IQ football play by Shedeur. He prematurely rolls out left because he knows the blitz is coming, and this is despite there being no pressure. And he knows the reason he can do this and still find an open man is because all but one of the routes on the field are on the wide side of the field. So he rolls out to the left and is in good position to find his man on an out route on the goal line, which Sanders places perfectly off of a very awkward angle. In that same game, Colorado's on the 34-yard line in a good situation to get a field goal, but Shedeur Sanders is able to get so much more here. Travis Hunter and him have tremendous chemistry due to the off-zone coverage, so Hunter hits a hesitation move and finds himself wide open on the other side of the field. But the beauty of this is truly Shedeur Sanders. His first read is this double move out of the slot. He looks off the deep safety, finds Travis Hunter, even though the TCU pass rush had gotten through the horrible Colorado offensive line. Despite knowing that he's going to get hit, Shedeur Sanders delivers a dime over a soft shaded secondary for a touchdown. Now, it might have been overthrown, but for someone that doesn't have a really good arm, who's actively getting crushed by a nearly 300-pound lineman, this is a pretty impressive throw. Shedeur Sanders was ranked as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Some people even said he was the best quarterback in the NFL draft. So a lot of people are wondering how he wasn't a day 1 pick and how he wasn't a day 2 pick either. And it's something that is causing many people to lose their mind. I mean, Mel Kiper is having a fit on the NFL draft.
I think it's disgusting. I don't understand what the heck's going on with this. 5th player on my board, other quarterbacks being taken who aren't as good as Shedeur. Outside of not being have the rocket arm and the 4.6 speed and a big frame, what is he lacking?
It's not just Mel Kiper that's losing his mind. Even Sean Payton says that it doesn't really make much sense.
I think we all are surprised, and yet the talent, holy cow.
Shedeur Sanders wasn't even the first Sanders picked, and it got so bizarre that even Donald Trump tweeted about it following the first day of the NFL draft, which is just insane. But yeah, Trump actually tweeted about this, saying, "What is wrong with NFL owners? Are they stupid? Deion Sanders was a great college football player and was even greater in the NFL. He's also a very good coach, streetwise and smart. Therefore, Shedeur, his quarterback son, has phenomenal genes and is all set for greatness. He should be picked immediately by a team that wants to win. Good luck, Shedeur, and say hello to your wonderful father." This sounds like a sponsored tweet if you really think about it, but if you do a deep dive into why this could potentially be the case, you get an idea of why Shedeur may have slid. If you guys remember, 1 year ago, Shedeur Sanders' father, Deion Sanders, appeared on $1 million worth of game. And in this podcast, he said that both Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter will pick which team gets to draft them. There are certain cities that aren't going to happen, and it's going to be an Eli.
Where do you predict Shedeur and Travis going in the draft?
Top 4.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
Anywhere from 1 through 4. One of them is going to be
speak it into existence.
And the latter one would not go behind 4. I know where I kind of want them to go. So there's certain cities that ain't gonna happen. He's gonna be a
Okay,
Peyton
you on
Manning.
point.
It's gonna be it's gonna be an Eli.
And this kind of gives you an idea of why Shedeur Sanders may not have been selected. He certainly has the talent to be selected in the first round of the NFL draft, but I think Stephen A. Smith says it best here.
I believe that the biggest issue in all of this was primetime Deion Sanders and the thought of having to deal with him. All I'm saying, fellas, is that it's hard for me to sit here today and to watch a dude that was once projected to be one of the top 2 picks to drop completely out of the first round and to ignore all those reports.
As day 2 came around, there was no question in my mind that Shedeur Sanders had to have been selected. But day 2 would be even sadder than day 1. The New Orleans Saints would be the first team that was quarterback needy and apparently even promised Shedeur Sanders that they would take him. But then they shocked the world when they selected Tyler Shaw over him. Now, if you guys don't know who Tyler Shaw is, he's a soon-to-be 26-year-old quarterback who went viral for this throw during the NFL draft combine that just looked terrible. When the Saints were asked why was Tyler Shaw selected over Shedeur Sanders, they just said he's talented, did well in the interview process, and the film was good. But that wasn't the only team that needed a quarterback. The Pittsburgh Steelers literally don't have a starting QB right now. They're going into the season with Mason Rudolph as their starter. But then they selected Caleb Johnson with their 3rd round pick instead of Shedeur Sanders. And from then on, it would just get worse. The 2nd round would come and go, and then the Seattle Seahawks, who technically don't need a quarterback, but could have a developmental QB in the event that Sam Darnold doesn't work out. I mean, after all, the last Minnesota Vikings QB that thrived in the Kevin O'Connell offense, that signed a huge contract with a different team, ended up not panning out, and the team's drafted quarterback ended up finishing the year as the starter. But the Seattle Seahawks opted for Jalen Milroe out of Alabama over Shedeur Sanders. And right when you don't think it could get any worse, the Cleveland Browns, who desperately needed a quarterback and were even mocked to take Shedeur Sanders with the number 2 pick in the NFL draft in some mock drafts, selected Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round over Shedeur Sanders. But I can't help but wonder if, I don't know, Deion Sanders saying this had something to do with it. There's only one explanation for this, and it keeps popping up in our face, and a lot of people don't think it's a valid reason or a valid excuse, but when there's multiple examples of a player whose talent isn't worth his character concerns and ego, then you really can't ignore it anymore. I mean, we have Deion on record saying that his son may pick his team and refuse some teams last year. But then came that one fateful report that Shedeur Sanders had terrible pre-draft interviews, and fans were all wishing that we could see what these pre-draft interviews looked like. According to an anonymous coach before the NFL draft, it was the worst formal interview I've ever been in my life.
Surprised it wasn't being talked about. That Shedeur Sanders, I told you, if you've been following the show from the beginning, I told you there were 2 personnel people that I spoke to who were in the room during interviews, which means they're key parts of the organization. Let's leave it at that. 2 teams drafting in the top 10 with quarterback needs where the interviews did not go well. Not disrespectful, nothing harsh, just felt like the phrase I've been using, and I think it aptly describes it. We didn't get the sense that Shedeur cared all that much about what we thought of him.
He's so entitled. He takes unnecessary sacks. He never plays on time. He has horrible body language. He blames teammates. But the biggest thing is he's not that good. And if you take a look back at this past year, there's been a lot of instances of Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders just completely shitting on their own offensive line.
I mean, how many times did Riley get touched? How many times did Riley get touched? They was able, like, of course, whenever you're able to run the ball consistently and whenever you're able to, then that opens up the pass, you know? But it's just like you got to understand, like, what your team good at.
In their defense, I understand their offensive line's terrible, but throwing your teammates under the bus like that consistently is never a good look. And if you're not good enough to back up that type of talk, teams are not going to want to invest in you. Because if you do end up becoming a good player, then they're not going to want to deal with the headache. So they're not going to take you anyway. Another NFC scouting director even said, when you hear all of the anecdotal stories about the person, it's not that he's a bad kid. He has been so insulated. It's going to be a culture shock when he really learns how a locker room really operates and how it really works inside a building. He's had so much input on the offensive game plan and who the coach is, and everything's been catered to him. When you walk in one of these NFL buildings, no one's going to give a shit about that. No one cares who your dad is. You're going to end up fighting through some adversity. The plays aren't going to be called to exactly what you want to run. Even last year, Colorado offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur, a lot of the mistakes he made was stuff that he just decided to call at the line of scrimmage himself. And there's no recourse of him making those decisions. Whereas in a real locker room, you make a couple of those decisions, you get your ass ripped so bad that you never want to do it again. Deion's response was typical Deion, saying that this is silly to us. Most of it's laughable. What I told him to his son, what I've learned in my life is when it don't make sense, it's God, because some of this stuff is so stupid that it doesn't make sense. Now, we all know what would happen. Shedeur wouldn't get drafted in day one, and he would say this.
We all didn't expect this, of course, but all this is of course, fuel to the fire. Under no circumstance, we all know this shouldn't have happened. We understand we on the bigger and better things. Tomorrow's the day. We're going to be happy regardless. Legendary.
When you take a look at some of his interviews at the draft combine, it makes some more sense as to why he wasn't taken. I mean, this video might have ruined Shedeur Sanders' life.
If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the culture, don't give me. You should know history repeats itself over and over and over, and I've done it over and over and over, so it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me. You think I'm worried about what critics say or what people gotta say? You know who my dad is? They hated on him too, so it's like, it's almost normal. Without people hating, it's not normal for us.
It would just get sadder from here. The Sanders family would build Shedeur Sanders his own little pre-draft room and throw a pre-draft party and decide to live stream it. And I have no idea why they decided to do this and why they're continuing to decide to do this, because people are just watching their downfall on social media. So I guess in terms of social media attention, it's good, because we got Deion Sanders' reaction to the New Orleans Saints passing on Shedeur with the 9th pick.
Kelvin Banks Jr., tackle, Texas. Shoulders up.
And then we got his reaction to the fact that the Saints took Tyler Shaw over his son.
New Orleans Saints select Tyler Shaw, quarterback.
Switch it up. Wow.
Well, probably the best piece of content that's ever come out of this day. And this is actually terrible. I feel really bad at this point, but somebody prank called Shedeur Sanders pretending to be an NFL team, saying that he got selected.
Mickey Loomis here, GM of the Saints.
How you doing?
Good, how are you, man?
Good, been waiting on you.
Way to go.
Yeah, we have. It's been a long wait, man.
No, for sure.
We're going to take you with our next pick right here, man.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Let's be legendary.
Yeah, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, man.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And the saddest part of all is it may have been some NFL team trying to screw with Shedeur, because according to him, nobody has that number but the coaches.
Yeah, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, man. Sorry about that.
And it would get way worse from here. I mean, Shedeur would react a little bit more humbly following the fact that he wasn't selected on day 2. But here's the crazy part. A lot of people are starting to say that Shedeur Sanders is going to turn into Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson or Tom Brady because he was selected late in the NFL draft, especially if he's a day 3 pick. But the reality of the situation is you don't start for your team when you end up being a day 3 pick. And Chase Daniel gives us a dose of reality here.
All right, the Shedeur Sanders situation is sort of crazy right now. Never did I think he'd be the 5th, 6th, 7th quarterback taken out of this draft. It's wild, but he is in backup territory right now.
Shedeur Sanders is officially out of day 1 starter territory. I mean, don't get me wrong, he could get his opportunity someday, but now he's in backup territory, which I guess is kind of a good thing because it means more teams might be open to taking him, taking a flyer on him, especially if he's a 1st round talent in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round. But Daniel Jeremiah and Joel Klatt also offered their input as to why Shedeur fell so far.
To me, if it's just as a player, I don't have an answer for you. You can make the case they feel like starters go in the 1st round. There's no reason to take a backup in the middle round. Just wait if you're going to take a backup later. I think in the right situations, surely as a player, he can be a productive starter in this league. Obviously, that opinion was not shared. They didn't feel comfortable wanting to coach him, or I can't tell if they say he just skill set wise, there's not enough ceiling and upside for us to take him at the high point portion of the draft.
If this is just about his playing ability, he's going to be drafted by this point. It's off the field. It's personality. It's fit with an organization. It's a meeting that didn't go the right way. This guy can play. Question, CD, is now you're going to draft him in for sure a backup mode.
And it's just really crazy because I think this is the first instance I've ever seen of a first-round talent quarterback that had significant hype surrounding him that could have been selected #1 overall in the NFL draft, falling all the way out of the first 2 days of the NFL draft and completely falling out of a situation where he could be a starter in the NFL. It just goes to show how important the pre-draft interviews are and how important character is to these NFL teams. So in the 5th round, the Cleveland Browns did something incredibly strange. They traded into the 5th round with the Philadelphia Eagles and selected Shedeur Sanders with the number 144th pick. Now you might be wondering why I think this is so strange. And well, if you take a look at Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's reaction as the pick is being called, you can tell that these two individuals aren't necessarily high-fiving each other, celebrating the fact that they selected a player that was ranked top 25 in draft boards in the 5th round. It seems like they're more irritated than anything, which is leading many people to speculate that this pick was called in by ownership and the Haslams forced Andrew Berry to make this pick, because at the same time the Cleveland Browns selected Tyler Shaw with a top 100 pick. And when you just take a look at the Cleveland Browns draft, it's just such an interesting draft. I mean, they had the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. They had a generational player. They theoretically could have paired Shedeur Sanders with Travis Hunter if they wanted to, and they traded back from that pick to the 5th overall pick and selected Mason Graham. Now, I don't think that was a bad pick at all, but the rest of their draft just looks so interesting. I mean, you're talking about a team that took 2 running backs, selected a lesser quarterback at the end of the 3rd round, and then selected a quarterback that was ranked higher than him in the 5th round. I mean, taking 2 halfbacks and 2 quarterbacks when you're just a terrible football team currently is a very interesting way to go about the draft, especially when you have the number 2 overall pick. But this isn't a video from the Cleveland Browns perspective. This is a video from Shedeur Sanders' perspective. And Shedeur's reaction is exactly what it should have been. It's just really funny because if you dig up old receipts, Coach Prime once said that if a player had to go to Cleveland, he would pull an Eli, which is the second time in this video we're referencing Coach Prime saying that he'd refuse specific teams. But from Shedeur Sanders' perspective, this is probably the best situation he could have gone in the 5th round, considering the fact that no team is selecting a 5th round QB with the intention of making him their full-time starter. And in the case of the Cleveland Browns, their quarterback situation is the biggest question mark. I mean, Shedeur's probably walking into the QB room looking like this. Deshaun Watson is out this season with an Achilles tear. Then you have Joe Flacco, who, to quote Deion Sanders, is as old as he is. Then you have Kenny Pickett, who's a journeyman quarterback. Dylan Gabriel, who's about to turn 26 years old and was drafted this year. And then you have Shedeur Sanders. And it gets even crazier when you consider the fact that the Cleveland Browns are only going to keep 3 QBs. You can assume that Joe Flacco is going to stay on the roster. Deshaun Watson isn't going to be on the 53-man roster, which leaves 2 spots in 3 quarterbacks, which means out of Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders, one of those players is going to get cut. And when you consider the fact that Shedeur is a 5th round pick, that he's currently the most likely candidate to potentially get cut. At the same time, you can make an argument that this is the best situation for Shedeur to go into because he'll have an opportunity to compete, to be the starter of the Cleveland Browns this year. And if I'm Shedeur Sanders, I would lock in as much as I can because this is definitely giving the energy of a team that is constantly going to be shifting quarterbacks throughout the season. I don't think this is just a QB competition that's going to occur in the preseason. I think this is one of those situations where they're going to start a QB for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season. Once that quarterback starts to struggle, fans are going to be clamoring for another QB, and especially when you have Shedeur Sanders on the team, this created a bit of a distraction for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, imagine when Tyler Shaw finally gets his opportunity to start for the Cleveland Browns this year, if Kenny Pickett falls below expectations, or once Joe Flacco has one of his infamous 4 interception games, and this rookie QB struggles throughout the first couple of games. Meanwhile, you're seeing fans clamoring for the Browns to put Shedeur Sanders in. If Shedeur can lock in and make the most of his opportunity, then he could potentially save his NFL career, but the situation is going to be very interesting to monitor for the rest of the season. Probably my favorite part about Shedeur Sanders finally getting drafted is Mel Kiper's reaction.
Cleveland Browns get a guy who should have been, in my opinion, a first-round pick, a high first-round pick.
Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about the Shedeur Sanders situation? Do you think this is something he deserved, or do you think NFL teams are trying to make a point? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.